This here is another viewer's broken gaming PC. It apparently doesn't send a picture to a monitor. The owner told me he planned to give the system to his grandkids, only he was disappointed to find that once it powered up, he never got that signal to his display. The screen remained black, and that implies that we probably have a serious hardware issue on our hands. Or maybe a not so serious one, who knows? Some of these are actually pretty simple to fix. You never really know what you get with this series. The system does look a bit rough, admittedly, as is, and that's because the owner was part swapping before he got a hold of us, and he unfortunately wasn't able to find a solution. He has a few ideas, which I'll talk about a bit later, but if you notice that the cable management is pretty much non-existent, that's why. He was swapping a lot of stuff out in a desperate attempt to get it working again. And in case you are wondering, the specs are as follows: a Ryzen 5 5600X, 32 gigs of DDR4, a B550 motherboard from ASUS, I believe, a brand new power supply, and a little over 4 terabytes of solid state storage. The graphics card is a brand new, supposedly, RX 580. Yes, you can apparently still buy these brand new, even though they are several generations old by this point, but for the right price, they don't make bad entry-level graphics cards. The only component I'm not sure about is the case. I don't see any logos or branding anywhere, although I'm sure somebody in the comment section will let me know what it is, though I don't expect that to have anything to do with the problem we're seeing here. Alrighty, this is gonna be an interesting one, I think, and I hope you'll stay with me.
Say goodbye to thermal paste with Thermal Grizzly's phase sheets. These pads rely on a phase change material that allows them to liquefy during operation and effectively dissipate heat like paste without all the mess. In a nutshell, these are designed to last longer than normal paste thanks to thermal expansion behaviors around CPU and graphics card coolers and the resulting low viscosity of these sheets once they're up to temperature. This keeps more of the material from being, quote, pumped out after each thermal cycle, which is why they tend to last longer than traditional paste. But don't worry, they're easy to install and won't break the bank, so consider giving them a try for your next PC build. Learn more about Thermal Grizzly phase sheets by clicking the link below.
Hello there, and welcome to Fix or Flop. If you're new, just know that everything you see us do in this playlist is free of charge to the owners in questions. We don't charge for hardware, labor, or anything like that, and it's because of your viewership. That's why we can do what we do here. We can monetize these videos on sites like YouTube. They're often informative, but can also be a tad bit entertaining, especially if I make a fool of myself, which tends to happen quite frequently here. That goes without saying, if you or someone you know has a broken system and you'd like a chance to have it fixed for free in this playlist, be sure to reach out to us via the form linked in the video description. You can submit photos, you can write a description, include specs of your rig, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. All that we ask is you be local to the Central Florida area. You have to be in person to pick it up and drop it off, because I don't trust shipping companies, and there's a good reason for that. Alrighty, we're gonna try powering this on for the first time. I'm not sure what to expect. I'm hoping that it lines up with what the owner describes. So we should get power. All right, off to a good start. We do see fans spinning across the board. I am not seeing a post, however. That's unfortunate. Still a black screen, so no signal, exactly as described. I know that's bad, but it's a good thing that it matches what he says. Now, interestingly enough, this motherboard does have an illuminated amber DRAM LED. This is throwing me off the scent a bit. And the reason I say that is because my initial hunch was that the graphics card might have been bad. This RX 580 is quote unquote new, but oftentimes when you have a no signal scenario like this one, the graphics card is either dead or isn't seated properly or isn't receiving power, since it is the closest thing to the display cable and the monitor where you're seeing the symptom. But if the board's telling us there's an issue with the DRAM, then I suppose it wouldn't hurt to start there. I'm also gonna take this opportunity to remove this front CPU cooler fan, because it's actually backwards. It's trying to pull air through the heatsink and out toward the front, but you have fans in the front trying to push air this way. It doesn't really make any sense as is. So I'm gonna swap that around when we go about reinstalling it. But for now, we're gonna remove it so that we have unfettered access to our 4 DIMMs. Oh, if I could get this thing off. It's a little finicky. There we go. Okay, so you can see we have 2 different kits of DDR. Ooh, and I can tell you already, that's that's pretty obvious. 2 different kits of DDR4. One of these DIMMs very clearly is not seated correctly in its slot. It's gonna be very difficult to see from any camera angle, but it's this 3rd DIMM here from the left. So this is in slot, I think this is B1, I wanna say, because B1 and B2 are next to each other in most modern boards. So that is, yeah, the smaller DIMM here, it is not fully seated on the bottom side. Actually, I think I can just go ahead and press it in. I also checked the other 3 DIMMs, made sure those were seated properly. I'm gonna leave the front fan off of the cooler just in case we need to mess with anything else over there. I'm gonna go ahead and just try powering on again as is. I mean, based on what the board is telling us, this should be the only thing wrong. Well, okay, I shouldn't say should, because DRAM is like one of the first 2 or 3 things to be checked by a system during the post process. So we could have another issue after that. I'd like a picture, but we're still not getting one. Okay, maybe the debug LEDs, oh no, what? It did, it posted. Okay, I was gonna say, maybe the debug LEDs are gonna tell us something else now. Maybe a VGA light or something, but that is great. That's a post right there. We'll run some checks and see if we can't load into Windows. Running a few quick sanity checks here. I want to make sure that his storage drives are detected. We'll probably have to find the others in Disk Manager if Windows is installed, and it does look like it is, so that's good. The other thing I want to check is DOCP. It's not running yet. I'm concerned about the stability of this because he has 2 different kits of RAM running. We could probably fine tune this to the lower of the 2, the common denominator in terms of frequency and timings. I'm just going to try DOCP for now and see if that sticks, and then I'm gonna click Save Changes and Reset. But uh-oh, I think we have another problem. Looks like now it doesn't want to react to anything. Every time it boots up, it just gets stuck on the splash screen. I don't see any, scrolly wheels or anything like it's trying to initialize Windows. Unless the drive connected that has Windows on it is the slowest moving thing I've ever seen, like glacier pace, I think there's another issue here. Before I start disconnecting stuff, it looks like there's 2 different Windows partitions in the system. I'm gonna switch to the other one and see if that fares any better. Also disable DOCP just to reduce outside variables. And would you look at that, we get the scrolly wheel, or it's more like a squiggly, circly line, whatever, in Windows 11, but you get the point. It's actually trying to load into an operating system. That's a good sign, although whether or not it actually does is a different story entirely. I'm not sure what's taking the system so long to boot into an OS. Like, he has 1 hard drive in here, but it doesn't look like that's where Windows is installed, or at least the Windows partition we selected in the BIOS. There's just no other reason why it should be taking this long. I'm inclined just to put an entirely new drive in altogether with a fresh copy of Windows and see if that works. I think the first thing I'm gonna do is try disconnecting all of the drives that don't have anything to do with the operating system. So I spent some time off camera testing the system with different storage drives connected because, again, I just had a feeling there was some sort of hiccup with one of the devices. Maybe it wasn't initializing correctly, or maybe it was trying to load into that boot partition if there were multiple. And again, we saw 2 at least in the BIOS. So to confirm, there is actually a Windows partition on the hard disk drive. This is a 2.5-inch drive. So I left only this hard disk drive connected and removed the other 3 SSDs from the equation. Booted up the system and it still froze. Then I tried the Kingston SSD down in the hard drive cage, and this actually also had a Windows partition on it. Booted into this, no problem. No hiccups, no freezes, no random stutters or anything. It was a very smooth experience. Then I connected the other 2 SSDs, so there's a SanDisk, which I'm not even sure what the capacity is of this one, and another drive that I have never heard of before. It's a, what is it, a FIK watt, something like that, Pluto drive. Both of these connected to the system along with that Kingston 2.5-inch SSD, and we still didn't have any issues. The 2 M.2s in the motherboard, I confirmed with the owner, don't have anything on them, so that's why they weren't really playing a role here. I don't even think they're initialized because they're not showing up in the BIOS, something you could very easily do in Disk Manager, but I don't want to tinker with anything beyond what the owner wants me to. The gist of it is the 2.5-inch hard disk drive was the reason why this system wouldn't load into Windows. So despite us trying to force the BIOS into booting into the Kingston 2.5-inch drive, for some reason there was still some sort of hiccup with the hard disk drive in question. Once that was fully removed, unpowered, of course, SATA data also disconnected, the system worked without issue. I let the owner know of this. He told me that he's trying to phase out that drive anyway. It really shouldn't even be in the system to begin with, and that's good news. I was planning to remove it anyway, or at least keep it disconnected. I want a stable system, and that's finally what we have here. We'll just remove this and take a quick look at it. At first glance, I don't see any issues. I didn't expect to begin with. There's probably an issue internally or with maybe a controller or something. The connectors look okay, nothing cracked or split there, so that's good news. I don't think there's anything sensitive on this drive, but if there was, this is probably recoverable. But one thing's for sure, the system did not like playing nicely with this, and that suggests that this is probably on its way out the door. Now let's try to peek between this tower here. Yep, so he's got his fan backwards again, so he's actually pulling air, again, from the rear toward the front, but he also has an exhaust fan trying to pull air this way, and then front intake fans also trying to push air through the case this way. So he's kind of counteracting the natural flow of air here because of the orientation of his chassis fans. It just makes more sense to flip these around such that the blades push air this way. Whew, my OCD is under control now. And lastly, I'm gonna spend at least a few minutes attempting to tame this rat's nest. You know, there's so many RGB fans in this build, and as a consequence, so many cables. Not entirely sure what I can do here. I don't have the right side panel with me. The viewer didn't drop that off of the system, which is fine. But I'm gonna do my best to tame this beast. It's gonna be tough because there aren't many zip tie points in this chassis.
8 hours later.
Yeah, we're gonna forget about the cable management back there. It's tough. This is one of the toughest I've had to deal with in a case, and I think it comes down to the case itself, actually. The fact that we don't have many zip tie points, and the fact that we don't have a lot of space between the back of the motherboard tray and where I expect the right side panel to sit. The last thing I want is for the owner to not be able to get his right side panel on because of how I've bunched up cables in certain runs, and there's just no other way to do it. So this is one of the few instances where I would just tell you, pack everything as tight as you can behind there and forget about it. Cover it up with the panel and just move on. It's not worth it in this chassis. You can see where I tried, but we have 9 fans in the system, all of them RGB, so they all have 2 cables apiece. And there's this one like fan hub up here, and then another RGB hub that for some reason is stuck to the front side of the case. I don't want to change that. Apparently that's how the owner wanted it, but this too, everything. It's a disaster back here. Just close your eyes and pretend it doesn't exist. The important thing is we now have a system that we expect works. We'll test that in a second, but just to recap, we also swapped around the CPU cooler fans. I expect that orienting these in the correct path so that air flows front to back naturally will improve temperatures even by a few degrees Celsius, at least on the CPU side. We tried and flopped at cable management. I'm gonna blame the case and the fact that I don't have a right side panel. That's an excuse, I know, but it's one that I'm gonna stick with. We isolated very quickly a problematic boot drive, and then we were able to solve the incorrectly seated DRAM issue. That was very fast diagnosis. Honestly, you could see it. Once I honed in on it, thanks to the debug LEDs on the motherboard, I noticed right away that one DIMM was not all the way in. And this admittedly is one of the more common issues that I've run into in this playlist. Many first-time builders especially will be hesitant to apply a ton of pressure atop a DIMM in order to fully seat it in its slot, and that is understandable. I remember my first time building a PC. Actually, I just disassembled one and rebuilt it. It was a system my dad had brought back from a hospital. It was a site he was working on at the time, and he allowed me to kind of dissect things and reassemble them, learn about things as I was going along. And I remember thinking that I was breaking something when I was trying to reinsert. I think it was DDR, it might have been DDR2. It was a very old system, but that always gets us the first few times. After those first few times, of course, it becomes more repetitive, becomes more familiar. It's not as jarring, but yeah, it was a very quick fix, and it didn't damage anything else in the process. Here we go then, one final hurrah. Let's make sure that all of the RGB cables we were just messing with are connected. It looks like every fan is lit up, every fan is spinning, so that's a good sign. Not too worried about the graphics card fans not spinning currently, because they do spin at least at startup just for a split second. I didn't see that originally, but they do that now. We are loading quickly into Windows. This is again on a 2.5-inch SATA SSD. It shouldn't take much longer here, and you can see, there we are, into Windows. Mission accomplished, folks. Thankfully, this was a simple one. If you learned something, if you thought this was an entertaining video, let me know in the comment section below. If you want to spare a thumbs up, that would be greatly appreciated. Also consider subscribing if you haven't already. These videos are rather commonplace on the channel, so if you're interested in learning, me making a fool of myself in the process at times, this is the playlist for you. This is the channel for you. Again, thank you so much for watching, and thanks for learning with me.